Hey, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday weekly discovery session. I'm happy that you're all able to join us. We have a lot of folks on today. We're going to get things kicked off by going over our project updates first. I'm going to pass that over to Al to do that. And then for our working session today, we're going to be reviewing some UAT feedback. I have a couple questions. I want to get some clarification on things so that we can start getting items back in development to get some of that cleaned up and back to you guys. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Al to go through our project update.
Thank you. So just to let everybody know, we have completed 27 last week. We are in the first full week of 28. The features and milestone sets that we are developing in 28 are touching on these things in front of you. We opened up the grant management piece, started that. It's going along well. Activity log, case notes, career plan. We keep expanding those areas. Training program review list. We're adding in reason codes on the reviewing process, training program status reason codes, customer statuses, UAT response, profile data, user roles, and local area office demographics. So all those things are in development, either enhancing those or in the case of UAT, maybe we have issues that we are fixing, and hopefully we'll get more feedback on that after this week too. Continued discovery. We are in constant discovery requirements gathering for customer intake, customer profile. As you can see there, I won't read them all. Assessments, and exits and outcome. Those are all part of discovery right now, where we're either with state groups or actually meeting with you folks. Okay. That is kind of where we're at. We will finish up this particular release or this sprint next week. And at that time, I'm thinking at the end of next week, we'll have some additional UAT functionality that we're going to push into our UAT environment. Thank you.
All right, does anybody have any questions on that before we jump into our UAT feedback? All right. So I'm going to go through all of our MSG items. If we have time, we'll go through release 2 cycle 2. I have not had time to dig into that one as much as I've gotten through all of MSG. So we got some feedback from the state. They have provided an example on how to better word educational functional level. So we're going to make some updates to that just to make that a little more clear what those 3 options are. We found a typo was found, and so that's been noted, and a user story has been created for that as well. So you'll see here most of these where we have action items, we have started creating user stories for to get those back to the devs to get that corrected. So I had some other feedback, Crystal. I really appreciated all this information and I wanted to talk through it a little bit so I understood it correctly to build the appropriate card. And in some of these instances, you are not the only person to say this. There's comments later on about some of these other things. So I know other folks had noted some of this. So please, everybody chime in as we talk through this so I can understand from your perspective the best way to present this information and either get an update made or I might need to go back to the state SMEs to work with them on the language wording or actions around some of this. So, Crystal, you noted that for the post-secondary transcript option, I'm going to actually open up the tool so we can jump over to look at it as we need to. So you had noted for the post-secondary transcript option, I think the accumulation of 12 credit hours in the same 12-month period is confusing. Do you mean a calendar year or academic year? I thought the wording of law policy is 12 credit hours in 2 consecutive semesters, which could be 6 months in the fall and 6 months in the spring, for example. The same 12-month period implies a calendar year to most lay people. That would be confusing to the staff person entering the MSG here. So I completely see what you're saying. Um, I would have, we looked at the Teagle for that. Um, and I can talk back with, I don't think Paula is on this call. Um,
I
she,
think Mark is.
Mark, I don't know if, we might need to, yeah, we might need to go back and really re-examine that Teagle just to double check that is correct. And if it's not, we can update it.
Yeah, I'm still looking at that from what we talked about yesterday.
Yeah. Uh, Laura, do you remember off the top of your head the Teagle? It's not 1016, it's Teagle 1023?
Sorry, no, 1023 is the administrative TCL, which as of this morning has been rescinded. It is 1016 change 3.
Change
You had it
3.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say change 3.
Question in myself. Okay. Um, it's just this for some reason doesn't look familiar to me. I think I was scrolled down too far, that's why. Measurable skill gain. And we are saying this post-secondary. So, I'm gonna pull this over because we want to explain like the what this is saying in a way that folks understand. So it is at least a total of 12 credit hours of courses or oh my gosh, sorry, my words. A total of at least 12 hours over the course of 2 completed semesters or equivalent during a 12-month period that shows participant is achieving the state's unit's academic standards. Um, I thought we had intentionally worded it that way, because it could be spring or fall, but if like there's a summer semester, they technically aren't like back-to-back semesters, but not everybody does a summer semester. Um, so that's why it's worded that way. Does that make any more sense, or do you think it's still confusing how it is?
I mean, I'm the one who wrote it, so I'll just speak. And if anybody else wants to chime in, go right ahead. I know what the Teagle says too. I just think that when you're looking at the making things as easy as possible and as clear as possible for staff who are entering MSG perhaps for the first time or whatever, that it is confusing whether you're talking about, like, are you limiting the 12-month period in this verbiage? Like, as somebody who doesn't, somebody who's doing it for the first time could confuse themselves by wondering, can I only do this if it's in a calendar year? Can I do this if it's in an academic year? Like,
It's about this shouldn't change necessarily a program they want to choose to enroll in. It's just whether you can use certain things to capture an MSG based on these number of hours.
And Mark,
So
it's any 12-month period. It's not necessarily defined to a calendar year or academic year, correct?
I mean, that's the way that I interpret, that's the way that I've always thought about it. But if that's the case, then it would be a simple fix to just say within any 12-month period.
Yeah, I think we can tweak the wording
Yeah.
of that a
Yeah.
little bit because I see exactly what you're saying now. Like, if you can put 12 months around when you earned those 12 credit hours, it fits regardless if it falls over 2 calendar years or 2 academic years. So we can look at the wording to make
no,
that
I
clear
thought
that
it
it's
said
any
it's got to
12-month
be
period.
in consecutive
Consecutive semesters.
semesters. Yeah, so it's not any 12 months. It's and the one question we had, which we kind of
Where does it say
determine isn't an
consecutive
issue,
semesters?
is does the summer semester count as one of those consecutive?
But where does it say consecutive?
I thought it was in that Teagle.
Secondary transit.
Scroll back down to there.
Sufficient number of which 2 complete semesters. Oh, you know what? I think the consecutive is in IWDS.
Yeah,
It's in IWDS where it defines, so based on what's here, it's different than what's currently in IWDS right now. Because in IWDS, it says consecutive hours. Now, the other issue is when you talk about secondary, I don't know if this is intent, but secondary schools don't have 12 credit hour semesters.
right.
Or it's because their credits are 0.5 credits for the semester for each of the classes that they take. So there's no way for them to get 12 credits in a semester or in 2 consecutive semesters.
But then you just have to find a different kind of MSG. I mean, that's the key thing with all these options for MSG is don't get fixated on trying to achieve just one type of MSG. Look at all the options out there, and if one doesn't work, look for another one. So
Right,
if you know, if like you're saying in a secondary education program, they'll never reach 12, then you'll need to find some other kind of MSG.
Yeah, so this is where I think some of the confusion comes in because here it's stated different than it is in IWDS right now that people are using when they go in there to put in an MSG. It's stated different because one is for secondary. There's a one for vocation, post-secondary, and one for secondary in IWDS. The secondary one just states that they're meeting the state's unit's academic standards for secondary education in IWDS. And
Right.
so that
There isn't.
doesn't dictate that they need to have 12 credit hour semesters. It just
Correct.
means that they acquired all the credits that they were registered for that semester. And so it's confusing when you look at this number 3 here compared to what's in IWDS because it's contradictory. So it just needs to be clarified, you know, what's doable because we were told that we can use their report cards as MSGs. But they will never get 12 credit hours per semester or in 2 semesters or in a year for that matter.
If you're looking at the Teagle, they separate secondary and post-secondary. And you're correct. There is no 12-month period discussion when you're talking secondary.
Yeah.
It is only stated that you can document it through receipt of a secondary transcript or report card.
Yeah, in IWDS,
And
there's
then,
nothing
like you
that
said,
talks
it
about
met
12
states, units of
credit hours for
policies, academic
secondary.
standards, but the 12-month comes into play for post-secondary.
Yeah. So we'll talk that through, make sure we have that right with the Teagle. And we are like, I do want to note that we have identified some discrepancies or things that have changed. The Teagle was a newer Teagle. So there are going to be things that do change in MSGs from IWDS to IWDS 2.0 to align with current policy and Teagles and everything. One of those was the like addition of a new EFL MSG, which they might get that added in IWDS. I don't know for sure, but I know it wasn't there when we were talking about some of this. So I have noted that I'm going to talk back to the SMEs on rewording this to confirm, does it need to be consecutive, and then better define how that year needs to go, and we can tweak the wording of that. And then the next item, there's 2 things here, and this was one that some other folks had said. So wanting to know, why do we even have below 12 credit hours over 2 semesters within the same period if it triggers a not like you can't move forward? The reason we have it, and we can talk about removing it if it doesn't make sense, is we don't want to only give people yes answers. We wanted to cover the full array of what could happen. So people aren't saying, oh, well, I don't meet any of these, but I have to pick one, and just picking one that is not applicable. And the purpose of these here are to ask the questions in a way that we're not trying to get at the right answer, but we're just asking the question with all the possible answers, and then providing information in this step if for some reason they don't meet. Because the last thing we want to do is not say anything if they trigger a no, because most of them are just yes, no. We didn't want to not say anything and have them fill everything out and then err at the end. There's a two parts to this. So one was, is it necessary to have below 12 credit hours if it's just going to flag a red? And the second was, if we flag a red, can we remove, like hide, remove, or maybe gray all this stuff out so they can't move forward? So they don't, a lot of people were concerned that folks would still like try to move forward because the questions were there. And so that's something that I have a card, or I want to create a card to do, is to gray this all out
Yeah.
if they have a no. You still can't say, like, if you try to save it with this, it won't let you save the record, but this will save folks a little bit of time for not inputting data that we can't do anything with if they don't meet the requirements. So I'm gonna open that up for discussion, make sure everybody's okay with one, graying out or hiding. I'll talk to the devs about the best way to do that. Because one of the things I want to keep in mind is if somebody happened to do this first and then selected no, I don't want to delete all their data. Like if we remove the fields, it's gone, and then they select yes again and have to do it again. So I think graying it out, like locking it, they can't engage with it anymore, might be our best bet, just in case somebody happened to do this and then change the answer for some reason. They wouldn't lose any work they did. So make sure everybody's okay with that is the first question. If anybody's not okay with it, please unmute and let me know.
I'm sorry, Olivia, when you're done typing, could you go back to the screen you were just at for a second?
Yeah. Oh, hold on one second.
Oh, take your time. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
no, you're good.
So when you were mentioning that, the graying out, I think that is a very good idea. But that part, so below 12 credit hours, and again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to split hairs, get bogged down in semantics either, but below 12 credit hours over 2 semesters within the same 12-month period. But if they can, because now I'm second guessing it, I'm sorry. So it's part-time and achieved at least 12 credit hours in 2 semesters. So like if they're doing 6 and 6, that works, but it says below 12 credit hours over 2 semesters. Is that implying 12 credit hours per semester?
No,
And
so for this, what it's saying is you're going to get a report card at the end of every semester, correct?
yeah,
So if in 2024, PY 2024 ending, let's say May of 2025, I only took 7 hours, 6 hours of credits and I got a report card and they were all A's. I don't get credit for an MSG because I don't have 12 hours yet.
right.
Come PY 2025, if I now can add up whatever I had in 24 with whatever I'm taking in 25, and I can total 12 hours, and that all occurred within a 12-month period of time.
Right.
So,
like summer
we
semester.
can't wait till
right. And then fall
June
semester.
of 2025 if
Right.
the first semester was finished in May of 2025, because that goes over the 12-month.
Right.
Now I've got 12 total credit hours in a 12-month period. That second program year, I can now use that report card to show an MSG gain. Does that help make it a little bit clearer? You can't use
Yeah.
it the first semester because you don't have 12 total yet.
Right.
But you can use it the second
example
one
you
because
gave
now you've captured 12 full out credit hours.
where they started maybe in the spring, they were part-time. It ended, you know, let's say June, like in June 1st, the spring semester ended. They only had 6 hours that semester. Then in the following program year starts July 1st, they're taking a summer class. They get a report card in August or something. Then you can record the MSG because they've got
Yes.
2 consecutive
Right.
semesters.
Yep.
No,
And I don't think, I think we're,
24.
if we wrote it in there that it says consecutive, I think we're in error on that. I think we just need to worry about a 12-month period. And for a
Right.
typical community college, you have generally 3 semesters that you can pull from those 12 hours. It could be the spring, then the fall. That's not consecutive in some people's minds because you skip summer. So I think the consecutive, I don't see that anywhere here. If we've got that listed that way, I think people are correct in saying
Right.
we probably need to move that out of there or make it clarified. All this says is it's in a 12-month period of time. So I think consecutive is irrelevant, but I think it
It's not
matters. So you
because
could take 11 semester hours in the spring and only take a quick summer course to get done of 2 credit hours, and now you've got your 12 in a 12-month period of time, but you only get an MSG in that second program year.
right. And it's not the consecutive that I was but I do appreciate you clarifying that and confirming that. Thank you. It was not that. It was just and it's probably just the way I'm reading it. I'm sorry. It's just like the third line there and the one above it almost seem like, as I'm reading it, they almost seem to like contradict each other. Like, because it's saying if you're part-time and achieve at least 12 credits in 2 semesters in the same year, 12-month period, but then it says below 12 credit hours over 2 semesters within the 12-month period. I get what it's saying. It's saying that combining the 2 semesters and that you took in that 12-month period, did you still not cumulatively achieve 12 credit hours? Because it kind of almost sounds like the same. Well, the first one said if you did get 12 credit hours over a 12-month period. So I don't know. It was that part of it that was just I didn't know if
have
it could
that
be
noted,
interpreted that you
Rory.
have to have 12 credit hours per semester. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
No.
We'll look at rewriting that a little
And-
bit to say like at least 12 credit hours over the course of or a cumulative. I have
Yeah,
that noted
that's
to
all.
look at rewording that one so
Well-
it doesn't mean like 12 credit hours per semester at part-time because obviously you're not part-time then. So we'll make that a little more clear.
And the other part of that making clear is that whole 2 completed semesters, because if I take 6 in the spring, ending May, take 2 in the summer, ending July, and then take 6 more, let's say in the fall, yes, I've achieved 12, but it took me 3 semesters to get there, not 2.
Right.
Right.
I shouldn't have said 6, 2, and 6. I should have said 6, 2, and 5, because over 2 semesters, I cannot add up to 12 credits anywhere in any 2 semesters in that 12-month period of time.
Right. You're either 8 or 7 if you do that. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, you could be 11, 6, and 5, because they don't have to be consecutive. Let's if we're not going to find someone that tells us consecutive, I think we need to take that out of there. So you could be you
We
could
don't-
attend spring,
Got it.
summer, fall, 6, 2, 5. You get no MSG because nowhere in a 12-month period of time did you achieve 12 semester hours over 2 semesters.
We don't say consecutive in ours. I think it
good.
was
Yep, yep.
confusion from how it might be currently worded or
I think when
used to be.
we read the 2 completed semesters, we were going, well, it had to be back to back, right? Well, that again, if we're the ones that kind of put that message out, that's our fault. We apologize for interpreting something, but I appreciate the discussion today because as I keep reading it, I think now it was very unclear before anyway, to a lot of us. I think in my mind, I have a real clear picture of what this might look like.
Yeah, Tony put in the chat a screenshot of what's currently in IWDS when we go in to put in MSGs. And so
Yeah, the consecutive needs to come out of there.
yeah. So, and so where this T goal differs with, in my opinion, differs with what was in that screenshot of explaining the secondary and post-secondary, what you can use, it kind of differs. And so that's why my confusion there.
Right. And I
Oh,
would like
go
to
ahead.
point out that all of this discussion really just highlights that the language that is currently there could be a bit confusing. And I think just with some tweaking can be fixed so that it's fine. And I think everybody on here knows how to, you know, we're all very familiar with how to do the MSG and we worked with it for a long time. But if you're talking about a new staff person coming on, looking at the buttons that they have to choose from, we want to make sure that it's as clear as possible moving forward.
Definitely. And I'm gonna ask that one of our BAs, Taylor, we started a training document. Do you think you could flag the post-secondary 12 hours per semester as an item that we might want to have additional like training on, like some scenarios as Mark was laying out? You know, it's not 3 semesters, it's 2 semesters, highlighting the 12-month period overall, like from start to end, not necessarily academic or calendar. I do think this is additionally, like hearing this conversation, I think this is an area that as we go through training and put together training on this, we could just, you know, have some good scenarios on how this could and couldn't work for people to be able to relate to.
And it's funny, they don't define full-time or part-time, but in essence, the whole 12-hour discussion, they're defining full-time and part-time. As 12 hours is full-time and less than 12 hours is not, which is weird why they wouldn't just define it and, you know, tell us a definition in that sense.
So the next question I have on this is regarding should below even be on here? Do you think with knowing that if you select below, it kind of grays out is okay, knowing that we want to give the full set of you're either part-time, full-time, part-time, or below the 12 hours at part-time? What are you guys' thoughts on is it okay to keep this to match the formatting of how we have set this up, like intentionally to give all possible answer options and not push folks unintentionally down a track because there are only 2 and they're just going to pick one to move forward, not fully understanding? Are you guys okay with keeping that, or do you want to dig into a little bit more around potential to remove?
My personal thought about that is that if it's we're trying to make things as user friendly as possible, and especially when somebody's just first learning how to do it, I don't mind at all having it there with the red box as long as what's below it is not usable or looks like it's not useful.
Perfect. Yeah, gray it all out like we had talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out if you click that, you either have to check the first or the second. Otherwise, you shouldn't click it on the top to begin with. Am I looking at it incorrectly?
No, that's right. That's correct.
Then I think you basically all it needs to do is if I click post-secondary radio button at the top, I have to click one or the other of the next 2 to continue moving on.
Yeah, that's how we're going to
So
set it
yeah,
up.
I don't know that the below is needed in that sense.
We're
Because if you click below, then you shouldn't have the top one selected. Because you can't use that as an MSG.
But I think the point is that when people are looking for MSGs, that there is an element where you need to know, oh, that I was wrong about that.
and that's what this is set up to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just need to gray it out so it's clear to them,
But-
like you can't move forward. Like they don't meet the requirements. Do not do 2, 3, 4, and 5.
But if you click that, then the top button should go away. You shouldn't
Thi-
have that select.
This is just your navigation to
No,
what
I
like the
understand.
type you're adding. So I'm adding a post-secondary. I get the questions. You can't move forward. So you'd be like, oh, okay, well, I have like a training milestone. I'll add that instead because I
okay.
can't add the post-secondary because I just got to know that you could try to add that one if you have whatever you need to add it. But they all do that. If you answer, this was a big piece. that both state and locals liked the idea of guidance for new folks from adding, and not just like, hey, I have a training milestone, I'm going to add it, with like just like upload and be done. I'm not sure how I think that's how it's done in IWDS. It's been a while since I was in there looking at their stuff. So I have that noted there. And we'll get that grayed out. This doesn't need an action, it's just a note. And this is done. Then leave the action red. Okay. We have a card created for this one. So there's just some language changes there. Sorry, let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Then another card created for language updates. They're all kind of put together. Oh, hold on, let me scooch this up. I'm running into other people's stuff. All right. So I make these green because it's my way of knowing that we've kind of looked through these with you guys. We created a card for this one. More just smaller text changes. So skills progression, the info bubble is confusing. So I wanted to talk through this one a little bit more to understand how we can make it less confusing.
Sorry.
It says benchmarks are not recognized as post-secondary credentials. A credential is not allowed to be reported or counted as an MSG. Examples of benchmarks are permits leading to CDL licensure. So is it the fact that this info bubble is talking more about what is not permitted versus what is permitted, and that this should be laid out differently? And do we want to not include benchmarks are not recognized post-secondary credentials, or do we want to add on to it? Tell me a little bit more about like what here you would like to see changed.
Well, it's been a hot minute since I looked at it. But I think it was because if I'm looking at it from the standpoint of all staff who are using it, regardless of their familiarity with what they're doing, where the info bubble is at and what the info bubble says, it seems a little like it's trying to do two things at once instead of just one clear function. So maybe that's what you were saying about, taking out the one thing that it's not and putting in what it actually is.
Yeah. Do you think, and I'll circle back with Paula, I think I work with her. This was probably called out for a specific reason, and I'm wondering if we like currently have things getting added this way that shouldn't be. But maybe we define that in the disc up here or something, or even in like this body, and then make this more aligned to like additional information on types of acceptable documentation, which is what most of the info bubbles do. Do you think that would be helpful?
I think so, yeah. I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but it just didn't seem to be the same as all the other info bubbles in terms of what it was trying to do. And I think I think I understand what they're getting at in the first place, because I know there has been confusion about which place the credential goes, under which, you know what I mean? Under which,
Yeah.
yeah. So I get what the point is there, but it feels like I'm being pulled two directions at the same time when if I'm clicking the info bubble, I want like a direct information period, not, oh, I'm not, I don't want it to be ambiguous.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And then I think the definition is a little bit confusing as well. That's already stated on there. The main one, not the info bubble, but on the bottom two.
Right here.
Yeah. So I think this is where it gets confusing for a lot of people too, because especially new people, because when you come in and you say, let's say satisfactory, because we're kind of using verbiage that's in the T goals and so forth, but staff may not recognize what that actually is, right? So satisfactory attainment of an element on a industry or occupational competency-based assessments. Like an evaluation?
Right. Or is it talking about the assessment that's like the testing for a particular credential, which I think is where the confusion comes in.
Right. So it gets so like when I hear that assessment, I'm like, well, okay, because the assessment can mean several different things. Assessment can be you assess somebody's skill sets in order to get into a program, right? Or you assess an evaluation where you assess whether or not they've completed successfully what an item that's on their training plan for that, right? Or whatever. Or is this saying an assessment as in an official test that they took and the result of that test is what we're looking for?
Right.
And so because that's a question that I get from staff all the time. So, like, well, it's an assessment. Well, yes, but does it really measure that? And then the next sentence right after that is also confusing too on there.
Hold on, I'm gonna get this example. Or a component or completion of test necessary to obtain credential.
Yeah, so other completion tests necessary. So we're talking about test records, right?
I think tests are the easy part of it. It's like
Yeah.
you're saying, what tells me this is a industry or occupational competency-based assessment? Because in my
Yeah.
mind, I think, okay, if I'm going through a welding class, I'm expected at 2 months to be able to do some kind of quality weld, let's say MIG welding, however that's defined. I could go out and I could weld two pieces of metal together. It's not going to be an acceptable, it's not going to be assessed as acceptable in my mind because it's just going to be a bunch of dots of metal fused together. There's going to be some kind of, quality that's expected to say that it's competency, it meets the competency-based assessment. That's not a test.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't want to be lax in this, but when we look at these and we just have to think of it from also an industry perspective, an employer perspective. Like I said, for me, if I started welding and they said, here's a welder, go put two pieces of metal together, I could do it. I've handled a welder before. There's no way in my mind an employer would accept the work I could do. So that to me is part of that competency base, but it's not a test. I'm not answering questions, typical test, like the other half of this talks about a test. So I think you have to look at the industry and occupation, the training provider, whether that be the employer or you know, recognized private provider, whatever, should have an understanding of what they would consider acceptable. And you have had to show that as the participant student.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
those wells have to be like in the AWS,
Yeah, there's standards out there.
program. There has to be a certified inspector, and yeah, you go and they have to, they will, yeah, exactly. They can
Right.
inspect work, and an industry would, a fabricating company would recognize that because you've now attained that on your
Yeah.
test scores. You've got proof or your card or whatever that says, yeah, my weld was inspected by like a master welder or something like that. Yeah.
So I guess so this is, I'm going to use a very solid example because we've, Mark and Paula, and we've talked about this particularly when we talked about MSGs, like a massage therapist, right? So one of our massage therapy programs, they have like 14 modules. In total, they have to complete like 600 or 900 hours. And so each of those modules are a certain amount of hours that they have to complete. And in order to move on, they have to complete those modules successfully. And so the program marks down that they completed that module of 30 hours and successfully, right? So are we saying that falls under this? And therefore we can use that 30-hour completion of that one module as an MSG.
Yep.
I think that's where I want to lean and take advantage, and someone above me can hear me and refute this, but take advantage of the gray areas that policy gives us.
Yep.
You know, many of us have sat on meetings where DOL has said, if it says it doesn't say you can't do it, then do it. Go ahead. We'll prove you wrong if we have to.
Yep.
So I like to use that thinking in my mind. So in your scenario, you probably achieved 2 MSGs.
Oh, more than
You achieved a time
it would have been like 14 MSG.
specific period of achievement with saying there are 14 30-hour courses. No different than there are 2 years of an apprenticeship. An achievement of one in their mind, in that apprenticeship program's mind, is an achievement, is a gain. So we could think of it that way. And if somewhere in that, you know, we'd have to look at the program. I don't want to say, unless it's, you know, if it's not outlined that way, I think you can't use it, that time specific achievement. But if each of those modules is a time specific achievement and you've gone through that successfully, then you get number 4, which is the satisfactory or better progress report towards milestones. Your milestone is 30 hours for milestone, you know, program 1 or module 1, and another 30 hours. Maybe the next one's 45 hours. Who knows what they're defined as? But if you then show through some skill assessment, maybe it's your master trainer or there's somebody industry. I don't know if there's exists in masseuse land like it does welding and things like that, like we were just talking. If someone can come in and observe you and say, you are doing great, you've met every you know, achievable measure for this type of massage, you know, then you could also say you've met number 5 because you've met, if this is outlined somewhere, you've met the industry occupational competency based assessment.
Yep.
I you know, I don't know if there's anything that says you can't count 2 for the same thing, but I think you're telling me you've achieved 2 different things.
Yep.
I you know, unless someone tells me differently, I want to use that to our advantage to get MSGs. And we'll explain it just as I explain it, or maybe you all can explain it even better. That's how you explain it until someone tells us, well, that's not what this says. And I'm going to go, then you need to tell me a little bit better. And, you know, like I say, I'm okay with, you know, if you have reasonable backed information to support them, I think we should be accepting, you know, these kind of MSGs. And I think that if we don't, it's when it really brings in these gray areas and all these questions of, whether we can. And then if it's truly gray and you can't define it and fit it into one of these 5 types, find a different MSG. You know, work with the provider to find one that's more clear, that you think you've achieved something in one of the other 5, you know, one of the 5 categories. If what you're thinking, you know, can't be clearly fit into there, then just try to find another one. I mean, I'd love to have a little bit more layman's terms on some of these, but some of these I don't know how much more without making a lengthy discussion versus trying to fit something into a couple sentences that someone can quickly see on a screen and go, oh yeah, I got one of those.
I think maybe in
Yeah.
this case, it would be helpful, not necessarily changing all the verbiage or whatever, but because of Paul's point is exactly right, that the same language is used to mean multiple different types of things. So perhaps just solid examples so that when a person who's looking at it can see, oh, that means, a welding, an AWS, whatever.
And that's what I want to take back and we'll meet with. That's what a lot of the info bubbles do, is provide examples. This one's providing like what not to use. So I think if we can kind of update some of this here to get more at that, that could be helpful, while still, to Mark's point, not having 5 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs.
I think number 4 and 5, you know, there is a little confusion. Just separate a little bit. 4 isn't based on an aptitude or skill. 4 is you've achieved goals within the training program that they have set out, whether, you know, 6 months, a year, whatever. Nothing in that says you've just achieved progress towards something that means you're on track to get your degree, certificate, diploma, whatever. We expect within a month you will be at this point. We expect at this point, you know, point number 2 is whatever, you know, and so it nowhere in that description does it say you have to show you're proving your skill. You've just attained, you've completed whatever it takes to get to that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's not testing you.
Oh, sorry, talking on mute. I have noted that we'll circle back to talk on that from the state. The next item I have is I'm not sure who added this. Does anybody know if this was theirs? I noticed that adding an MSG would fail without uploading an attachment. Is it possible to override the requirement of uploading a document? If somebody added that and just wants to pop their name in the chat just so I can put a name around this, that'd be great. I like to try to know who these came from so that we can circle back if there's any more questions or follow-up needed. I did note, I got an email about this too, that currently the way we have it, we are requiring that a document be attached to the MSG. We're with 2.0, we're moving to have more digital documentation collected. So we're requiring the upload as part of that. That then allows, as monitors come in and look at this, they can easily see the documentation associated with an MSG. These will also be housed in like the overall document library for that customer, but it's tying that all together. So that is why we currently have it set up that way. But I did note that I will talk with the state to confirm that is the same route we're moving down. We're always having conversations about like best practice and process flows, and they still are working a little bit on defining the upload policy. So we're working with them to try to get that finalized sooner rather than later, so we can make sure the system is performing it correctly.
Olivia, are we expecting a physical or electronic piece of evidence because it says documentation? Are we interpreting the word documentation as it has to be a physical thing? It can't be a case note that someone, you know, or I mean, I'm just wanting to make sure that first that's the reason why we're asking for something physical or electronic representation of that.
Yes, but it was flagged in another one that there might be certain, like, so for example, the EFL, this one is auto added by the system, and
Yep.
just having the tape record in the system will count as that documentation. Same for the credential, when you upload that credential record. Um, I don't know if the credential record will require a copy of the credential, but if so, the credential record with or without the copy, depending on what the state decides, would count. And I think Laura noted another one where maybe I have that flagged for discussion, where we need to be like accepting something other than physical documentation to count. So we can do it both ways. Right now, these were all just set with needing physical
Well,
documentation, but to
I'm
be
okay with
changed.
that. I just don't want us to be too stringent in looking for, a report card or something. I mean, some of those obviously that's what they are. And the one I'm going to again is this fifth one where it says competency-based assessment. To me, if an instructor were to give an email about a participant to the career planner explaining how they achieved that, and that was through their assessment, which might have been just a visual, you know, check about their skills, I would think that email would be able to be counted, and we might
Yeah,
have to check that. But I just don't want to be so stringent that we're looking for some official
no.
document that has. I'm okay with everything having something uploaded or at least in a you know note of some sort. I just don't want it to have to be some kind of like I say, what we traditionally think would be documentation as a report card or a test.
Yeah, it's not set up that way. So in your situation, they would like upload a copy of the email
Okay.
for verification that like the employer, whoever
But I think it needs to be
provided
more than
that.
just a case note.
Yeah, right now it is
Yeah.
more, right now we do require like everything have some form of physical documentation, whether it's like a printout of an email or a physical report card or whatever it may be. And they can also choose to add a comment. We're going to be making comments and case notes. Like we're going to be moving more towards like a communication type space where we'll pull all of this type of comments and case notes in, because we really want to move away from you having to do an action and then go add a case note. We want to like tie it for you to be able to do it all in one step and then just pull it in so that you can filter on. I want to see all comments and case notes. I only want to see case notes. I only want to see comments. I only want to see this type of case notes or comments specific to MSG. So we'll give abilities to like filter down on types of communication. But you have the ability to do it here. You wouldn't have to also then go add a case note. So that's how it's currently set up. Um, oh, I don't want to close out of that. I do have it flagged that that's the route that we're moving for, and I will confirm with the state on that though. Um, we have that for several areas. As I said, they're building out their upload policy, so based on that, things may change a little bit, but I do see them moving down the route of more digital documentation. I don't think they're wanting to move away from that unless they absolutely have to.
Well, along those lines, what happens in the case of duplicates? Like,
Duplicate.
like for documentation where you upload, like having the upload document item on each MSG. What if you have, are you asking like, the way that it is now, if you had a
Mhm.
transcript, let's say, and you're putting in as many MSGs as you can find, that transcript could have multiple things on it. So you're uploading the transcript like 2 or 3 times, the same thing, to meet the different requirements of the MSGs. Like, is there going to be like a policy at some point of cleaning out stuff that doesn't need to be in there anymore, or replacing it with new stuff? Because every transcript, the further you go, it's got the old stuff on it and the new stuff. Like, I
They
don't
would be
know where it kind
tied directly to the MSG record. So as you add a new MSG with a new transcript, you would have a whole new record tied to the newer transcript with the newer data tamed. You might have, like you said, like 3 different types of MSG that you point to the same proof of like documentation for proof for, and those would be stored with their individual records. So as the monitors come in, they can easily get to what ties to what.
So that would require the same document uploaded 3 times because it has to be tied to 3 MSG in that instance.
Yeah, they would just select file and pick
I-
that same document.
Yeah, is there any way around that? I think, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Crystal, is if it's already there, can't I put a case note that say see transcript from X date for proof versus me uploading it every single time? I
Which
think
route do you
you're going
think
to
would be?
discourage MSGs because they're just not going to want to bother uploading it multiple times.
We can definitely do that. I don't know that.
I mean, documentation. I don't
Is
care about
is
one
it
document.
is it easier to click your button or type in a case note referring
I
to a
like that.
separate record that the career planner would need to go back and make sure like, oh wait, what record was that? Okay, it was this MSG on this date. And then the monitor, when they're looking, are going to have to be, that's the way why we kind of
Well-
have it this way. I didn't realize it wasn't brought up that tons of the same documentation was being used across MSGs. So I'm wondering if we can have like a select file, add existing file, like keep this and then have add existing file button, and it would pull open a list of their existing
Yeah.
files, and you could pick from it, like, oh, I just uploaded their report card, and you would have it in the list. So we have that we have their uploaded files here. And so when you click that, it would almost pull open a list of all their existing documentation, and you would just like pick, I want to use this one.
That's
So
exactly
then the
what I was
system,
thinking of, Olivia.
okay.
Yep.
I was just trying to
Because
think
that
of a way
happens
to
in
keep-
some other documents where it says pick from your most recent, like in Yahoo email. I send stuff out to people all the time, and it says, and I hit attach the paperclip, and it pulls up documents I've sent recently, and I can grab it again because it's a new email rather than have to go find a document in a folder and
Right.
attach it. And then Omar's got a question.
Yeah, relating to that MSG one, it's a general question about the comments that we put right after we attach the document. Does that transpose into a case note, or is that just a comment for that MSG?
So moving to the new system, comments and case notes are going to be, I'm not going to say the same, but similar, and we're going to house them in a communications page instead of just a case notes page.
Mhm.
It's going to be more communications and pull in case notes and comments. So
Okay.
it will be tied directly to the MSG. So as you're looking at MSGs, you can see them. But then if you go to your communications page, I'm not sure that's what we're going to call it exactly. We've been having discussions on this actually. So when you go to your communications page, you can also see not only your case notes you've added, but you can see comments that have been added and have a map. So you know, like this is a comment that was added as part of a post-secondary transcript report card MSG for like this date attained. Or you added this comment on a goal or a service. We're wanting to move away from having folks have to do an activity and then go add a case note. So comments are tied into a lot of places to serve as a case note like feature to allow you to just add additional detail here, and then we'll populate our communications
Okay,
page.
so when you say that, that means when you do put a measurable skills gain and put a comment along with it, that resets the counter for 30 days and 90 days, whether it's a service or a case note. Am I correct by saying that?
So
Yeah, that's just what I was going to ask.
we are flagging specific types. Taylor, can you note that for the two-way communication? So we have identified when you do that for like in your goals and services, we have triggers that will reset that 30-day communication and reviewed career plan, 90-day review career plan. When you do MSG, it probably will not reset the career plan 90-day counter. But if it needs to also reset, we can talk about if it is a significant enough activity that we can assume
It's
30-day
not,
communication with customers happened.
sorry to interrupt, it's not for regarding the service resetting. It's the case note. So when I go in and put a MSG like today after communicating with the customer and notate that I have received an MSG in a comment, and
Uh,
then reflects over to a case note, that resets the case note counter.
I see what you're saying. It's the
The 30
30-day
day.
two-way communication.
Yes.
Yeah, I just need to confirm with the state before I answer that for sure. That I know right now the way IWDS does it is anytime you add a case note, it's like case notes every 30 days.
Uh-huh.
We're gonna be enhancing case notes a little bit. Um, Taylor, I mean, I don't, I'm gonna let you kind of speak here because that's your area, and I don't know if every case note resets that clock. And we can assume the same with comments, or if there's going to be some additional business logic in that, or if that's still under discussion.
So
Yeah,
some of that will still be under discussion. We will have a customer contact category in case notes, and only successful two-way communication will reset that counter, but we are looking at what other items will reset that counter, whether it's those services comments, MSG comments. So that's some additional work we still have to do on that end.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about, like, for your instance, two-way communication, whether that resets it or not. That's a two-step thing. One, you identify that you had two-way communication, and two, you have a case note to describe it, right?
Case note or comment.
Or comment. But I'm just saying that it's a two-parter. So that really, in no instances should a case note or comment be the what the heck is the word I want to use? The reason to extend participation. It's the action activity related that comment or case note is related to that actually is the determining factor on whether participation extended, right? Like, you just don't put in a comment that said I had two-way communication. We're going to have a checkbox that says you actually succeeded with two-way communication, right? Because we got 4 or 5 options. I called somebody, left a message. Well, that's not two-way communication. Called and I talked to them, and we talked about. So by checking the 1 or 2 boxes that really is considered an extending participation, that's the action that should change the clock, not the actual note itself, right? I mean, does that seem more logical?
Yeah, so to Mark's point, well,
Yep.
that I think that's a good point I had not considered is how the 30-day communication clock triggers here. We're still having those conversations, but a box here at some point to flag, like, was this determined as part of successful two-way communication that could reset that you check. That way, if you just got an email from a provider and did never talk to the customer, we're not just auto assuming the 30 days has reset, but we're giving you the ability to let us know right here and not have to also go in and add a successful two-way communication case note.
I think that's a great idea.
Can I just say something real quick? For the resetting, there's 2 clocks that are being reset in case if there's a service or if there's a case note. Now I know the case notes are every 30 days, and it could be like a successful two-way communication, and it could be an unsuccessful two-way communication, depending on the customer's response. But it will show an attempt of communication. Doesn't that, with the new structure of IWDS, does that reset the 30-day case note clock, not the service clock? I know the service has to be a service and a two-way communication, but as far as the case note, like if I reach out to the provider, the customer, whether successful or not, does that reset the 30-day clock for the case note?
Taylor. I'm gonna let you answer that based on how the options in the two-way communication would trigger.
Based on
Or,
conversations with the state, you would still document that information, but only successful two-way communication resets the 30-day timer. So if you have unsuccessful communication or just like an outreach item that didn't require a response from your customer, that would not reset the clock.
can we flag that, Taylor, just to circle back with them when we continue our case note conversation?
Yep, I'm making notes over here.
Awesome.
I just have a follow-up question to that is then, when you talk about two-way communication, you could have a two-way communication just to get employment information from them, right? So we're saying that kind of two-way communication counts and it would reset the clock.
Is it whenever you're adding that type of information, we have to flag that it was successful?
Okay.
I'm not sure that I am the appropriate person to be answering these questions because I have not been I'm not overseeing the case notes and all the business logic there. I definitely understand what you guys are saying and getting at. And so we can circle back to have more detailed conversations around this type of logic with case notes, with Taylor having all her stuff up and ready to answer these questions.
Perfect.
Taylor,
Thank you.
does that sound good to circle back with them around
Yeah, I
the
think that sounds
triggers?
fine.
I don't want to misanswer any of your questions because I am not as deep into that.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to, because oftentimes we see this with like youth a lot, right? They ghost you. So often. So you could do attempt to contact, attempt to contact, attempt to contact. And then all of a sudden, you email them and then they email you back and they just give you a one-liner, I'm working here. Well, so you had two-way communication there, but they didn't give you any kind of information, right?
Mhm.
Or you didn't provide really a service. So how is that going to be defined in the parameters to where it counts as two-way or not is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Because then you could have all these attempted contacts and you could have these legitimate two-way communications, but none of them count because a service of some kind or a change of some kind didn't happen.
We are
Yeah.
building another category within customer contact that's labeled other communication so that you can still document that information, but it's not the definition of successful two-way communication. And unfortunately, I can't give you a definition of successful two-way communication. That is something that the state will have to determine. But once we have that, we'll be able to provide like info bubbles on all of these so you know like what is exactly considered successful two-way communication, what is other communication, what those items mean and how they trigger that 30-day timer.
Thank you.
And we'll provide training around that. That'll be
Yep.
part of the training module as well. We have about 15 minutes left. Probably won't be able to get through all this, plus have a couple other pages. But we'll definitely keep digging through this stuff next. Well, next week you might have UAT. So the remaining time of UAT session next week, we'll keep going through this, but I'm going to use my last 15, 20 minutes. There's no info bubble for a past subtest or high school equivalency. That was an oversight. I'm going to connect with Paula to get that text. Paula and Mark. This came up on the state call. They want to possibly look at changing the educational functional level. It is a bit confusing, so they are actually having conversations on that. There's a typo. This was noted on a previous comment, and we created a card for it and just tied that card here. And then this is the comment I made made earlier about if there's other things that we can be looking at, like if things are limited to being documented in the career plan or progress report can be used when the skills were established in the training plan for OJT or WEX. If there's a career plan, will there be an objective for the training milestone or progress report? And if we have that documented and marked potentially as successfully completed, are there ways we can auto-populate some of this? So we're going to have more of a conversation with the different state SMEs on the best way to do this and adding in business logic around supporting how do we know things were already documented and how can we like auto-populate and use data in the system as proof. This was already this was discussed already about the 12 hours. So this was asking for credentials earned and uses both an MSG and a credential. Will this entry connect to the credential section? I talked about this a little bit, but yes, we want to have logic to tie as much of this together. So maybe you earn the credential, or you earn the credential, you add that on the credential modal. We want to have a way for you to flex, because not all credentials count, but we want, for those that do, we want a way for you guys to easily be able to check a box or answer a question that says this is also an MSG, like meets the MSG requirements, and have it auto add to the MSG. So you're not having to add it twice. That is similar to like the where we're in areas where we're like adding the credential for attained secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent or EFL, or want to do the same thing on when you earn a credential, that would count. Industry recognized credential. I wanted a little more clarification on EFL subtype of HS equivalency includes general education equivalency GED language. I wasn't sure what that meant. Hold on, that is subtest of high school equivalency. I'm not sure what's wrong here and how it needs to be changed, I guess, is my question. I don't know if we have that individual on. Does anybody know what Elvia's this?
Oh, it looks. It's Julia. We're looking at the person. Zaida's not on today.
I think HSE is just the new term used for what used to be GED.
Well, GED is a type of an HSE. It's what we typically consider. A GED is a high school equivalency exam. There are other types that most people don't, I don't even ever can recall what other types of HSE there are.
Yeah.
Generally, we think of the GED as the HSE, but there are multiple types. So, yeah, we're trying to get people to understand HSE is a larger, broader term, and GED is just a subset of that. But I know it's difficult to change some of our habits of decades of thinking only in the terms of GED.
And that's what this info bubble will like expand on to say like this could include your GED. And yeah, I was just doing some other work where it listed out a bunch of different things that kind of fall under this category. But yeah, So is anybody seeing an issue with that, or is it just that it's new language? I was a little confused there.
I think it's just new language and we just need to get people up to the current
Yep.
language.
Yep.
And then put, like you said, you can put in the info bubble. This includes tests such as GED, high set, any of the others.
And then task. I think those are the only three I've ever heard. I'm gonna
Task, yeah.
put that in, where the heck did my
Yeah.
chat go? Well, I guess I didn't need to include that last sentence. I just grabbed it from their website. I think there's only three in Illinois from what I've read, and so they're listed there.
Perfect. This was a similar comment about the info bubble. We already have that noted. Sarania's got to come back in. was going through more of this early this morning. So we'll add that bug card there, work to get a info bubble. A catch on future dates. We don't want future dates for date attained. So we're gonna put a card in to make sure it has to be a current or past date. This comment about you right now, when you type in a date, you have to put the little slash, or it errors out. I think this might be a limitation of our data input field. We have it doing a couple other things where if you type in 3793, it'll auto assume 0 and in the 3 and in the 7 and then update it to 1993. I'm going to talk to the devs to see if we have more capabilities of doing that. If we do that, then it might require that you put in 0307, so it knows where to put the slashes. Or it could just, I need to talk to them because I'm not sure what we have the ability to do there.
Yeah, I think if you put the zeros in, I think the current IWDS even can do that with interpreting the dates, but I do believe it has to be in, you know, month, date, year, the 224 thing.
Yeah, and we had a lot of feedback last session where people just wanted 1 digit and 2 year and then the system to auto update. So I'll talk to the devs, but it might be one or the other. But I'm going to talk to them and see. Then there's a missing word. Have Sarani to get a card for that. We'll put it in our text cleanup items. And then another card. To add the star, I think is missing for some of the upload section. So we'll clean that up to make sure it's very clear that all of the uploads are required. Paula made a suggestion of tweaking a sentence. So Saranya is going to create a card to update that. Paula noted one of the things we want to do with the MSG modal is, or component is make it dynamic. So whenever we're engaging with the modal from within a customer profile, it can be more specific to that customer. So if I haven't triggered an MSG, we want to either like gray it out so you can't engage with it and provide text that says like you haven't triggered this. Or maybe we have the text and then you just when you try to click the add button, it just says like you haven't triggered. That was kind of Paula's question. And then again, that blue box text, we want to be dynamic. So it shows a little differently based on how you trigger it. So it's really clear to the end user, like why they're now on the hook for this or that they're not on the hook for this. So they're not unnecessarily adding MSGs because they think, oh, it's here and I just need to do it. They are only doing it when they trigger. Mark and I walked through this. I think we got that resolved. And then here are enhancements from today. We're going to reorder the MSG table so that it is listed date attained and not alphabetical. So your newest are always at the top. And then as you use your filters, you can filter down the list, but it's still sorted. So newest is at the top. We had a couple people. There's a comment on this page, and then I had 2 comments on this page about people who were able to upload MSGs and the document didn't go with, for whatever reason, you can't download it. So I've asked Saranya to create a card and put the number of it here for our devs to look at those records and see what happens so that we can get some resolution out on that. And then we already talked about this. This is the whole, are the comments going to populate the into case notes? So that is the whole conversation we had around a communication page. And then, yeah, those are the document not uploading. So we have a couple action items for creating cards. Red is new stuff or stuff that still needs addressed or covered with you all. And then we have open cards. As these get closed, I will come in when these are resolved and mark that the update has been made. They will be happening potentially a few next sprint, which will start. On the 4th. Most of them will probably get in though on the following sprint of the 18th. Do you guys have any questions on the MSG stuff? All right. We still have a lot here to go over. I am going to pause for today though. I would like to spend a little bit more time digging into this before I start covering it with you all so I can have some information readily available to like dig in with you guys, save everybody a little bit of time. But with the last few minutes, I do want to give Al an opportunity. Al, I don't know if you want to give them a little update on the UAT they should be expecting. If we're still planning on that being next week or just timeline and what we're going to be covering so they can start thinking about who they need to have on that call.
No, that's a good idea. Sure. So, I haven't got anything written up, but I'll just tell you from, it looks like, so as you remember, I think we showed you a couple times when it was in design and all that and requirements gathering, we have a new ETPL screening process, which is kind of a self-serve process where it's open to providers, and this would be a new provider concept. So if there's a new provider that wants to add their training program, then they go into this pre-screening process. When they get through the pre-screening process, then they get to obtain a access to the system, get an account. When they come in to get an account, then they can add information about their entity and their locations, contacts, and then enter their training programs and submit those for review. Now, the pre-screening process will be ready to review, and you'll be able to work with that. And then you'll be able to work through the whole entire training program, creating it, submitting it, reviewing it, and those kinds of things. And that will be available. That should be all available in the next UAT. So we'll have a guide and then we'll walk you through that process and then you can kind of hammer that out and see. So anyone in your local areas that deal with training programs, and now just to remind you, the training programs are going to be reviewed. So if it's an in-state training program, it will be reviewed by the LWIA that according to the area that provider is located, right? So if a provider in your area would submit a training program, then that would come to your LWIA ETPL coordinator, whoever that is, but that's the user type that would look at that. You'd go through that, review that. If there was any problems, you would recommend it for not approving. If there was no problems, you would recommend it for approval. That would move on to the state DCO ETPL coordinator, and they would review it themselves and either approve it or not approve it. So that's the whole new process. We'll revisit that again when we talk about the UAT session, and we'll walk you through the demo, of course, and then we'll let you work with it so that you can give us some feedback on, is it intuitive? Do the questions make sense? Do you understand? And do you think that your providers will understand that also? So that's coming up hopefully after the end of next sprint. Thanks, Olivia.
Does anybody have any questions before we close out today?
Just real quick, because we haven't gotten to the application search testing comments today. Is there still time to go, and if a staff person or so hasn't had a chance to do that, is there still time to go in and put those in the notes, like if we any observations from that?
Yes, please do that. If your staff
Oh,
have not got in and done UAT, although we have what we try to do is give you a week to do it, because then we kick off another one and a week to do that. And we don't want to allow too much time, or then everybody just waits till the end and now they have like 6 cycles of UAT and can't get through it. So we try to have those deadlines of 1 week so then we can move into the next cycle. But the UAT document will be open and we'll be monitoring for the entire release. It's very, very, very important that you guys get in and get your staff in to user acceptance testing. This is your
yeah,
time
we've
to
been,
like let us
yeah,
know what's going on. So definitely, if they haven't done it, have them still get in. That's perfectly
we've
fine.
been doing it and playing around with it, but then it's just a matter of time or just forgetting how to access get your code to access it. Just as far as
Definitely.
any comment, I'm still going to see if I can gather any comments, and it could actually be that no news is good news, that they just didn't have any, because and with this one, I mean, it is. I mean, we already went through the introductory part. The larger part of this was when you first introduced the testing for creating and entering customer information. So it's that the hard part. The bigger part was already done, so it could just be that. But I just wanted to double check if there was any feedback. We'll go ahead and put it in the notes. So I just didn't know if the notes were going to be closed, but
Nope.
they've already been looking at it and testing it. So thank you.
Yeah, that'll be open. And for everybody, it'd be a great idea if you probably follow up with your staff and make sure they got it done. We had, quite a few comments, but still with all the people that we have engaged, we didn't have very many. Love to assume no news is good news, but probably good to make sure that they're not forgetting to do it, or they have access. If you have any access issues, do reach out to us. We have noted that access is not like the greatest with all this. So we're actually meeting today or tomorrow and going to be talking about better ways to get you UAT resources. So when we do release with OWL stuff, we'll probably have some different links that should be way more accessible than what we've ran into with these first 2 cycles of UAT. So with that, thank you all for your time today, and we will connect again with you next week.
Thanks, everyone.